This is a test. This station is conducting a test of the emergency broadcast system. This is only a test.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Thunderpud number 2, and I'm proud to present the Good News with the Reverend Dr. Volume 5. I turn you over now to your co-host, Agent C.
Thank you, sir. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
How's your week been?
Busy.
Yeah.
Busy here.
It's a busy week, man. I'm telling you. It's been a weird week, too. It just feels like, I don't know, everything's happening all at one time, but it's going so slow. Like, if you can understand that.
I think anybody with kids understands that.
Oh, brother.
Yeah.
Or even with a job, I mean, yeah.
Just everything has just piled up at one time, and time it has just drug out. Anything new in the news?
You go. What do you got?
Anything new?
Guys, I tell you, my week's been pretty...
I hadn't paid a lot of
shitty.
attention,
Yeah,
actually.
me either. I haven't really been tuned in this week. Not as much
Anything
as usual.
new with the Jesse? Anything new?
I think he got wrote off the show. It seems like that's new.
It just got wrote off in general?
Yeah. It seems like he did get wrote off. I know Joe Biden entered the presidential campaign. That's,
Creepy Uncle Joe.
Yeah. I wonder if he'll feel his way through this election cycle here.
It's so funny because about a year ago, or maybe even 2 years ago, my timelines are terrible. You saw the memes with Joe Biden. It's like, the funny memes with Joe Biden. It's
the
like,
ones with him, and Obama. Yeah, right.
Yeah. It's like, I'm not getting this.
It's so funny.
Fucker Trump, I'm not giving him the secret codes.
Yeah.
The thing that's so funny to me is how they're pushing Biden as the alternative to Trump, but candidates like him is how Trump became president.
God, yes. A friend of mine at work was, trying to get me into a political conversation, which I just don't do. Mm-hmm. Only time I talk politics is here on this show. And, he's obvious. I shouldn't say obvious, but I took it he was not a Trump guy.
Right.
He was like, yeah, it looks like Joe Biden's entering the race, and we were talking a little bit, and I was like, well, what do you think? He was like, well, I think he may be the only person that can beat Trump. And I was like, I don't even think he can at this point. I'm predicting right here, right now, Trump wins. Absolutely 2020. Not. I think right now we just got to figure out how big of a landslide he's going to win by.
And unless, I would say unless, and who's, I hate to call him a kid. He's what, 35?
Kid to us, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's his name? The young guy that just entered.
Oh, is it Ben? I don't know, brother. I haven't really been following.
This is terrible. I don't even forget.
You talking about that Beto guy?
That's who I was thinking. Maybe
is that
Beto.
right?
Well, who's the Asian that may be in? Is it Wong? Maybe is that?
I can't say.
I know. We're very prepared today.
Okay, this is a prime example of this week.
Yeah. I was going to say, man, today might be the accumulation of just a slow, not the best week, not a terrible week on my end, but definitely not the best.
Yeah. Let's see. All right, who are we looking at here?
Well, I know we got Warren, who's, I believe she's running. Harris is running. I guess. I don't know if that's been official, but I know that their names have been being brought up.
It's going to happen.
It will happen, absolutely. Obviously, Biden being the main news right now.
Pete, is that?
Pete, you go ahead, brother.
you try to pronounce that last name.
Buttigieg or something like that.
I won't say it's. No, maybe not.
He's the one who's gay, isn't he?
I think so. I think he is. Yeah. Pete Buttigieg or whatever. Something.
Butt-gig.
Buttigieg.
Stop it. Yeah.
We're not saying a word, brother. We didn't say a word.
Kamala Harris?
Kamala.
Yeah, Kamala Harris.
I can see those memes already with Kamala from back in the day.
There
I've
already
already,
has been
yeah,
one.
I've gone.
Because you know his real name's James Harris, and there was one that says,
Oh no shit!
and it says there's only one Kamala Harris.
I had no fucking idea.
Whoa.
I had no idea that was his real last name.
Andrew Yang.
Yeah, Yang.
Yeah.
That's who I was trying. I said wrong by mistake, but yeah, I think that guy was actually on a couple talk shows, a couple podcasts over these last couple weeks. I haven't watched it myself, but I hear this guy's pretty centered and actually maybe has some sense, which I think the Democrats need at this point is somebody with some sense.
Well,
man.
I think there's only going to be two real options. It's either going to be Biden with Kamala Harris, or it's going to be probably Beto with Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, I think either way, Harris will end up on the ticket.
Yeah.
I believe so. I don't know much about her. What little bit I've seen, she doesn't seem too bad. I mean, she seems like she's got some sense to her, from what I can tell. But
I mean, I think she's kind of a Democrat in name only.
right, kind of one of those.
Well, one of those just like Joe Biden or John McCain, or any of those
Established.
people. Yeah, very pro war on drugs, very
yeah.
pro taxes.
pro-war.
Yeah, pro war,
Pro-war.
all that.
Yeah, like I said, I'm not very familiar. I've heard her name come up a few times. Elizabeth Warren, I think she pretty much already, is on her way out. I'm pretty sure she's not going to make it. Bernie, obviously, Bernie.
I don't think he's going to go very far
He's
this
still
time.
kicking around, and there's still people out there, Bernie or bust. I mean, they're out there.
I know, and I see it, and I'm like, wow, guys. What?
mean,
In 20 years, we're going to remember Bernie as our Ross Perot.
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. Yes,
Yeah.
that's a great
He's-
analogy.
He's
Yes.
going to be this guy that made a little bit of noise and went away.
Yeah, and got people, into it. There was definitely the Ross fans,
Yeah.
and 'cause
Oh, yeah, for sure.
These Bernie brothers, I'm telling you guys, they're a different breed.
Yeah.
They really are. I'm talking
Yeah.
about the Bernie or bust people, man. They're a
Yeah.
different breed.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie. I thought some of what Bernie said made sense. I'm not going to sit here and shit all over him. I think some of it didn't.
Right.
But I think Bernie has some good messages in there. I mean, a populist. But I just don't know how practical it is, nor he's so old now.
Well, on some psychology level, he's what young people want. I mean,
Yeah.
if you think of every stereotype of millennials you know about, he's this grandpa figure kicking them money saying, hey, it's going to be all right, I'll pay your rent.
Yeah, I'll pay it for you. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, and Bernie, somebody does have to pay for it, man. And like I said, I know we're not talking politics per se, and I know today's not just shit on the Democrats today, but the Democrats, to me, because I used to be a very hardcore Democrat. I mean, my whole life, I came up Democrat. I voted Democrat all my life. It just seems like somewhere down the line, the Democrats have lost that centered working class mentality. They're so much identity politics now. Most people tend to shy away from identity politics, and I think that's why Trump, hate to say it, but I think that's why Trump kind of, is where he's at now, because he kind of reached out to everybody.
Well,
And,
I only voted 3 times, which I think we talked about before on one of our shows. In 2008, I voted for, I want to say Bob Barr, maybe. That was,
Okay,
it was right when Ron Paul jumped out.
yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
I think I voted for him. Then in 2012, I voted for Gary Johnson. And
Yeah.
in 2004, I really don't even remember who I voted for. I think I might have voted for Lyndon LaRouche.
I
but
can't.
I can't even remember who I did. But then after 2012, I quit voting.
Yeah. I will vote. I still do think it counts. I used to think wrestling was real too. It definitely, regardless of if the vote counts or not, which I do think it does. I think it at least gives people that I'm participating, I'm helping.
Well, I think
I'm
it
doing
counts.
my
I just
role.
don't think it matters.
There you go. Yeah. By the time they get to that point, they've already been bought and sold.
I mean, I think it matters as much as who wins American Idol, I guess.
There you go.
but
Yeah.
Maybe less.
Maybe less, actually. Yeah, American Idol might still have a little bit of actual competition
Yeah.
in there, and
I guess, honestly, what it really all boils down to is, who's on social media and who knows how to use it with some common sense.
well, that's the thing, man. And who can appeal to the youth? I mean, really appeal.
Yeah.
Well, what's going to really hurt the Democrats, and why I'm
What's their meme game like?
That's it. And we all know the left can't lean. Well, and man, with the primaries, dude, the Democrats are going to destroy themselves. I mean, by the time you have a winner out of those primaries, they're going to be so beat up by their colleagues that Trump is just going to be able to steamroll them, man. I'm telling you, Trump, he's an asshole, and he gets down to that gutter level. And if you can't compete with that,
Yeah.
I mean, you're not going to be able to approach this man sensibly with reason. You're not going to do it. He's going to insult the shit out of you, and you're going to have to be able to take it and give it back.
Oh, let me ask you this, because I saw this pop up on Facebook yesterday, locally, at the tag office.
Okay.
Okay. If anybody's familiar with the, North Carolina license tag office, that's where you get your license tag, blah, blah, blah.
Pack a lunch.
Pack a lunch.
You're going to be there
for a while.
You're going to be there a while.
But there's stuff. They're on sale while you're waiting. You can pick through, and there are a line of 2020 Trump hats. Let's keep America great again.
They're there.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you this. Is that a government building?
Yeah, as far as I know. Yeah.
I think so.
I'm not. I mean, I can't say with 100% certainty, but I can say about 99%. Yeah, I mean, it's the state.
Yeah. Is that
legal?
I don't know. I don't know if I want to say legal as the word.
Is it right?
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know. That's where it kind of gets a little fuzzy, right now, because we have capitalism and we have a huge businessman, but he is the leader of the executive branch of government. So I don't know.
Right?
To me, it'll never not be funny walking into the VA or anywhere and seeing Donald Trump's giant frame picture right by the door.
No shit, man. There's still times where I hear President Trump and I'm like, what? I mean, still to this day, man, I heard it on the news or on something. I don't watch the news anymore. But President Trump, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, fuck. It's still, I haven't gotten used to it. I just haven't gotten used to it yet. I'll never get used to it, dude.
It's like saying Vince McMahon.
Yeah, I mean, seriously.
President McMahon. There it is.
Which one day could absolutely happen.
There you go.
Yeah, we're looking at pictures here online. It's got Keep America Great, Trump 2020 in our local tag office.
Man, that was sweet. They put a black mannequin.
They did, man. They got diversity. Yeah. Their mannequin heads are very diverse here. Yeah, I think, man, if you're going to do that, then you should have the other side too. I mean, that's how I look at it. If you're going to have, Trump hats, then you should have Democrat hats in there as well. I mean, that's how I look. But
that's the thing, and that's almost the wicked genius of Trump is he knows how to market himself.
Oh, hell,
just
man.
Just like that. There is nobody on the other side that can market themselves like that.
No, I mean,
whether we've always been this way or whether we became it over time, Trump's genius is that he realizes that what America is it's a place to shop.
Yes.
It's a giant mall.
Damn right, man. We are a land of consumers.
Slogans, logos, everything.
Dude, he gives his
branding is everything.
Everything. Man, he gives his opponents wrestling names like Crooked Hillary. I mean, he does. Yeah. He does, man, and it gets over.
Oh my God, what was the worst one he ever did? I heard he called
we call Elizabeth Warren Pocahontas.
That's the one. Yeah.
What
the most vicious one he did was, do you remember when they had that guy who was sending fake mail bombs I guess to the place from Florida?
Yes.
Trump put up a tweet that had a picture of a blanket, and he said Pocahontas received a smallpox blanket.
Ain't that some shit?
Oh my God, who
does that?
The fuck does that?
You know who does it? Fucking people that we know, assholes that we all know.
Yeah,
and that's why a lot of people vote for this asshole, man.
He's Cartman as a president.
He is. Oh my God, yes, he is fucking President Cartman.
Yeah,
and people eat it up. Well, I was watching Tim Pool. I've been kind of following this guy recently. He was the guy that was on the Rogan show that kind of took the Twitter president to task. Pretty liberal guy, but he's kind of becoming a right-wing spokesman here lately because he's really been calling out the left on a lot of their, hypocrisy and, just some of these negative things that are coming out of the left that nobody really reports on as much. And I was listening to him, and like I say, this guy, in my opinion, seems to have a pretty good head on his shoulders. But he had a hell of a point. He doesn't like Trump, let me put that out there too. But he made a real good point. He was like, if you're about to get in a fight, in a real fight, and you got two guys that's got your back, one of them's over here trying to be all diplomatic, well, let's maybe try to find a compromise, or let's do this, let's do that. And you got the other guy over here like, this guy's a fucking moron. Fuck this guy. Let's take this guy out. Which one do you want backing you?
Well, a thing that's really easy to understand is you don't respect somebody who's constantly apologizing.
No, you don't. And let's face it, Obama, and I liked Obama. I thought he was a pretty good president. I didn't think he was the greatest. I didn't think he was the Antichrist. He to me, he did come across as kind of soft. He really did, in my opinion. You know, he went on an apology tour. I mean, come on, man. Whether or not that was deserved, I'm not saying that he shouldn't have done that. I think maybe he even should have, but...
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry.
And you got Trump over here like, I ain't sorry for shit. fuck all y'all, man, if you don't like it. And I mean, but people, regular everyday people respond to that because, once again, going what Tim Pool said, who would you rather have your back? A well-spoken, well-thought-out person, or, hey, look at these fucking assholes. Fuck them all. Yeah. I'm going with that guy if I'm in a fight. Now, I'm not saying I want that son of a bitch to have the nuclear codes.
Right, yeah.
Which is unfortunately what we do have right now.
We don't give him... yeah. We don't let him know where the ammo is.
Yeah, no shit.
Yeah.
Fortunately, Trump may not be able to enter the codes. That's the only thing we can hope for, man.
Yeah.
As long as it's not on Twitter, he might, get a little discombobulated there. But, well, guys, I'll tell y'all what. I think we should go ahead and dive into today's subject.
Absolutely.
Reverend Doctor, this is something that I know that you're an expert on. Obviously, I'm not an expert on anything. Agency, I'm not sure what your knowledge is on
a little
today's.
bit.
So I'm really looking forward to it, to just take in what you guys have, especially with you, Reverend, because I know this is an episode that we've all been looking forward to.
Well, a thing that I was thinking about just now was how to tie in the discussion we were just having with the subject.
Yeah.
And on the way here, I passed a...
Sorry about that.
Everybody went to their phone.
That was my bad.
I just thought it was funny when that phone went off, everybody's hand went into their pocket.
Yeah.
Is that on the way here, I basically, like, almost just right down the street, I passed a Pizza Hut. And do you remember how Pizza Hut used to be when we were kids? Like,
good.
Yeah, when it was good.
Yeah, like, I mean, they had
well, it was the place to go in Lincoln.
It probably wasn't, but we were kids and it was good.
It was good.
That's sort of what I'm getting at, is that there's something about that you look back on your childhood,
Right.
And you look back on it with sort of rose-colored lens glasses.
Absolutely.
I guess, but when you look back on it with more discerning eyes, there's things about just the culture in general that almost seems creepy.
Right on.
Like, how you were talking about with Trump, his big success is that he realizes that America is a giant place to shop.
Right.
And the things we remember about our childhood like that, it's more like the sensory overload that a kid gets from being in a shopping mall.
There you go. Right.
Yeah. And another one, how just recently, the last movie I'd seen at the theater was Us.
Right.
Did you catch that?
I haven't seen it yet, no.
Okay, well, I won't give any spoilers, but Hands Across America, the thing they did back in the 80s.
Yeah.
And that's a big plot point, which I won't say any more than that, but I went back and watched some YouTube videos because I didn't remember it. Like, I was too young to remember it.
Right.
But the way the director talked about it is it's almost like the videos you would see where Susan Atkins and Leslie Van Houten, like all the Manson girls, would come out of the courtroom singing Christmas songs.
Yeah, right.
That there's all these things about culture that seem, sort of innocent or childlike at first, right. But there's this really weird cultish undertone about them. And the big thing that I always think of, though, is how they used to advertise Scientology on television.
Oh, dude, I remember as a kid, those Dianetics.
Yeah.
What was it? Is it Dianetics? Is
Yeah.
that right? Yeah. I mean, that book was advertised every day
Yeah.
when I would get off from school. And it would be shown during children's programming.
Yeah.
That's what blows my mind looking back. I mean, this would be on when, like, He-Man or the Transformers were on. I mean, it was a trip, man. And it was all through daytime television, too. Like, if I would be homesick or something, I remember just seeing that volcano.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
All day.
Well, see, I know. I remember, and this is my, just being naive. I honestly thought, I didn't understand it at first.
Oh, I
when
didn't.
I saw it, I was like, I thought it was, honestly, I thought it was some kind of diet thing.
Yeah.
Because it always put
See,
out
I always
me-
assumed it was like a Charles Darwin thing.
Yeah. See, I thought it was like
Because
a self,
science is in the name.
yeah, or like a self-help thing.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I thought, because it'd even be
Well,
like
see,
be a
like-
better person or
Yeah.
something to that degree.
Well, see, it was like, Dianetics, to me.
diet.
Yeah. Well, see, yeah, because, at that time there was like, synergy.
So, yeah.
That whole thing through the 80s
That's-
where it was just like this craze of just,
Almost new age to
Yeah.
a degree.
Well,
Yeah.
the 80s
Yeah.
was like a decade made entirely of cocaine.
Oh, Jesus,
Right.
man. Yeah. Well, you had Reagan.
Yeah.
Hell, somebody had to fund those wars,
Yeah. Exactly.
That's what I've always said about the 80s. Everything was hyper. Everything was hyperalized.
Well,
Everything.
the thing that's so weird to me looking back on, and this is the 90s that I'm going off of in my memory, but how we all remember those commercials on TV of like the volcano going off
Yeah.
and going, oh, that looks,
It looked cool.
yeah, that looks kind of cool.
Yeah.
But then you don't know what the hell it is, but then knowing what you know now, you're like, fuck, they were advertising Scientology during children's television.
Yes, man, a fucking cult.
Yeah.
I mean, for lack of a better term, and it was a cool commercial. I think I even remember asking Mom if we could get it, and they're like, "Hell no."
Yeah.
I mean, you know what? no, we're not getting that.
No, I'll get you that He-Man stuff, but we're gonna draw a line at the Scientology.
Yeah.
No,
Like we may allow an Aussie cassette in this house, but you're definitely not bringing that shit.
no. You gotta draw a line somewhere.
You got to draw that line, And I don't even know if my parents really knew what it was, but they were like, "No, hell no, we're not doing that."
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it does kind of blows your mind that this cult was advertising all throughout the day, which tells you right there, man, that they had to have a hell of a bankroll. I mean, you got to spend money to be able to promote like that.
Well, their publishing company and the people who handled all of their public relations was Hill and Knowlton back in the day, the same ones that handled all the wars we fought in, basically.
Right.
The same one that, like, all the presidential candidates went through. I mean, they were the powerhouse.
Right. The real power.
Yeah.
The power behind the scenes,
Yeah, I think it only really changed after Time Magazine ran their story about their expose about Scientology, and they sued, and Hill and Knowlton were sort of put in a middleman position, forced to choose between Time Magazine and Scientology as to who they had a future with.
Right. And so
Yeah.
they went with Time
Yeah.
Magazine. So Ben, let me ask you, I'm not, like I said, very familiar with the subject. Can you give a little bit of a background, sort of what is Scientology like?
Of course, how much you want to know?
Everything, brother.
Let's start with the beginnings, the creation of Scientology, and where it came from, where it was founded.
Okay, well, if we're going to talk about Scientology, we have to filter this as the way we would almost any big movement, because there's something that happens. Well, I'll back it up even further than that. You can't really understand Scientology without understanding its founder, because it's really just the crystallization of the views of its founder.
Right.
And when you're trying to study about or learn the life of L. Ron Hubbard from an academic perspective, you have something happens with the founder of any religious or political or social movement, which is that for reasons oftentimes beyond their control, their biography gets pretty hopelessly corrupted by either bias, either positive or negative, lies for political gain, embellishment, so on and so on. You get to the point where you have to examine multiple sources, both positive and negative,
And try to pick out the truth.
before a middle picture really begins to emerge.
Right.
Because Hubbard's one of the most polarizing figures I can think of in current American culture, anyway.
I would definitely agree with that, 100%.
Yeah, now if you ask the church, they're gonna give this biography of him as being the recent Buddha or something.
Exalted.
Yeah,
Right.
And if you ask apostates, like people who left the church, they're going to say he was the biggest scumbag to ever live.
The devil. Right.
But, the truth is really probably somewhere in the middle. The same as if we were talking about fucking, anybody from Buddha, like I said, to Karl Marx, to anybody.
Any person.
The
is
founder,
like that.
the founder of any movement has a situation like that.
Right, exactly.
So the way we can do this is I can give you sort of like a brief biography of him. Hubbard was born in 1911 in the early part of the century in Nebraska. As a child, his family ended up moving to Montana, where that's sort of where you begin to see the mythology around him start, where, according to his story, he taught himself how to break horses by age 3. No, seriously.
Oh, okay.
Age
3, breaking horses.
He taught himself how to read, and was reading classical literature and philosophy and everything before he started elementary school.
Okay.
And he became a blood brother to the Blackfoot Indian. And I believe this was before he started elementary school also.
So he had a hell of a childhood there.
Yeah, he did. Well, he was exposed to a lot of things. His father was a man named Harry Hubbard, who was a naval officer. And Ron, as a child, used to accompany him on his tours to the Far East. Right. And the stories go that when he was there were men that he met who had been students of Freud that he sat and listened to and just heard them talk, which was probably true.
Yeah, sure.
That he soaked a lot of things in and just sort of picked and pulled things he liked. But then his part of the story that he tells says that he backpacked solo across Asia as a child, and that he mentored under monks.
As a child.
Yeah.
As a child, okay.
As a child. Now, I mean, there's a lot of embellishment going on, but there were a lot of things that laid the nucleus for who he became in life, because he was a lot of things. You know, he was an amateur pilot. He was a sailor. He was an explorer, and he was somebody who, you know, enjoyed going to far corners of the world and interacting with primitive tribes.
Right.
And that's something you start also, again, seeing the nucleus laid in these stories.
Right.
So the story goes that around the time he reached college age, he returned to the States, and he attended George Washington University. Right. And he had wanted to study philosophy because that was sort of his natural bent and what he was interested in.
Right.
But probably in reality, he realized there was no money in it. So he began studying quantum physics. And
I did not know that.
Yeah.
I've never heard that.
Well, see, the thing you have to understand about him is that everything, the biography doesn't like greatly converge from fact. It's just that there was a truth to what happened with everything, and there's like the bullshit version.
Right.
So the true version is that according to his school transcripts, he only took one class in quantum physics, that he finished with a D and dropped out. But
the legend, however.
The legend says that while he was studying in this program, that he postulated a theory about a unifying life force that exists within all things. And
the Force, like from Star Wars,
somewhat,
pretty much.
But and this was later laid down in a book that he wrote called "The Science of Survival," that says that you know, if you take Maslow's hierarchy of needs and how you can condense it down and say that the primitive drives and everything are to basically eat, sleep, you know, fuck, find shelter, all that. Well, he said that there was a deeper urge beneath all of those, which is just survive.
Right. Which, you know, that makes sense.
It does make it makes sense. I don't know about like being profound though.
Yeah. I mean, I was going to say it's nothing, you know, earth shattering. Right. You know, survival being your main driving factor.
Well, he billed that as being the center point to this entire like book that was going to, you know, revolutionize everything. Right. So the story goes he dropped out after he postulated that theory because he realized like he didn't need any more from it. So he became a pulp fiction writer, which is where he made tons and tons of money.
Right.
Actually, pulp fiction, you know, was called that because that was the type of cheap paper that it was written on.
Right.
But he wrote in a large variety of genres, everything from Western to romance. Science fiction was the big one, though.
Right.
And he hung out with a lot of authors who were big back in the day, like Carl Sagan, Isaac Asimov, Arthur C. Clarke. You know, all those guys knew each other. They hung out with each other.
Right.
And allegedly, he authored a lot of Hollywood scripts under pen name.
Okay.
Which I don't know. I really don't know whether that's true or not. I've never been able to find any verification whether it's true or false, but he said it.
That's part of the quote unquote legend.
Right.
Again, right.
So around the time that World War II broke out, he went into the Navy. He was commissioned as a lieutenant, and he was given commission over his own ship. And for his part, though, Hubbard's service record has never been fully released to the public, and nobody's entirely sure why. But the rumor has always been it was because he was involved with Naval Intelligence Project that laid the groundwork for MK Ultra.
Oh no shit!
That he was one of the architects for the program.
I've never heard that one either.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So the story goes he was injured during a sea battle, I believe. And where it ends up with him in a naval hospital is sort of what, how would I say this? It formulates the grand myth of Scientology, like similar to the resurrection of Christ.
Okay.
I guess that that's the only word I can think of to call it is the grand myth of Scientology, which is that he healed himself of his war injuries. And not only did he heal himself, he healed himself through applied philosophical maxims that he had developed over the years, related to the power of like mind over matter.
Right.
And not only that, but he healed other patients who were there as well.
Okay.
So, and this is what, of course, laid the groundwork for Dianetics.
Okay.
After he got out of the service in 1945, he drifted around a good bit for the next 4 or 5 years. He ended up hanging out with Jack Parsons out in California, who was a disciple of Aleister Crowley, who Hubbard was a big fan of as well, also. And Parsons was the guy who ended up forming Jet Propulsion Laboratories.
Okay.
And have I ever told you about this story, or have you ever read it about how they were both occultists and there's an entire ritual they worked on called Babylon Working?
No, I've never heard. This is the first time I'm hearing this.
Agent C, you know this one?
I'm not familiar with that one.
Okay. Well, the idea was that there was a hypothetical ritual that Crowley had never accomplished, but it was called Babylon Working, and the idea was to invoke a female Antichrist figure. And so they were going to do it through sex magic, through intermediaries. And Hubbard was going to act as a scribe for the ritual.
Yeah.
And
this is brand new to me.
Yeah.
So we touched a little bit on the sex magic.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
And what this all there's no way to have just a simple conversation on this subject.
Yeah. This
I don't even know how to go into it, but these were guys who believed that demons were aliens,
right? I
guess, and the idea was to invoke shit like that, these otherworldly or other dimensional entities,
to bring them into our domain here. Okay.
And what it did was, and there's an interesting timeline you follow, because what happens in the immediate aftermath of this ritual was Roswell and all this shit that happened out there in that area. Yeah.
Really? Yeah. I've never heard this. Obviously, I've heard of Aleister Crowley. I've heard of, some of his rituals, and I've even heard that he did communicate with aliens or quote unquote.
It's the exact timeline, because this happens just before all the UFO shit starts.
I didn't
all the different branches of Air Force intel and naval intel around UFOs forming something like a couple hundred confirmed sightings in the Southwest.
No shit, around this time.
Yeah, and Parsons, ends up dying in a lab explosion under really suspicious circumstances.
Okay.
And Hubbard goes on to do what he does.
Jesus, man. Yeah, I had no idea that there was any connection between Hubbard and Crowley. I had no idea.
Yeah,
that's brand new hearing this shit.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, do you know, around 1950 was when Dianetics was published. Him coming out of the Navy and then bouncing around for a while studying the occult and everything, that it all sort of culminated, I guess, with 1950 when Dianetics was released. The easiest way I can explain Dianetics is that it's a word that he made up.
Okay.
He pulled out of his ass. Do you know the meaning of the word?
No, I do not. In fact, Reverend, let me ask you a quick question. Have you read? I'm assuming you have. Have you read it?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I have not. So
I've read the entire thing. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Sorry.
Well, what Dianetics means is it's a combination of two Latin words that he invented and put together. Dia, which means across or through, sort of like the word diameter.
Okay.
I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, dia, and ethics comes from the word gnosis. Like, sort of like, imagine cybernetics, like cyber thought.
Okay.
But netics would mean, in this case, thought.
I see.
So
Okay.
Dianetics would mean across the mind or through thought.
Through
like
thought.
So basically, like, it's a diagram or a program of how the human brain works.
Got you. Okay.
A lot of people have this idea nowadays, coming from all the shit that's come up with all the Leah Remini and all the sensationalism, is that people think that when they open Dianetics, they're going to go head first into, Xenu world or some shit. But that's not something that comes till way, way, way later when you
Right.
paid a lot of money.
Yep.
Like,
Exactly.
Dianetics is really just, it's almost, no, you know what? I can't say it's bland reading because it's not. Like, it's very dry, very cultish type
Okay.
reading, I guess, because it comes across like you're reading the instructions for programming a stereo or a VCR, but it's about the human mind.
Your mind.
It's like it's a laid out thing of like, this is how the brain works.
No shit. Okay.
Yeah.
Like an
It's
instruction manual.
At that time, it was definitely, it had that new age feel to it,
Right.
to where
Right.
it was not. I don't want to say it wasn't so much over the top,
Right.
and it was a little more inviting.
Right.
To where
Right.
It's like, okay, I can
Well,
kind
see-
of understand this if I read it like an instruction manual.
Yeah.
I can kind of get, okay, I can understand that. It's
Right.
not over the top. It's not.
Well, another thing is
Right.
you have to go back in time to really understand it's 1950, because Dianetics was a bestseller for around 2 years, like #1 bestseller all over the country.
Right.
And it was a real fad, like almost like the hula hoop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the real reason why is because people have gone back, like sociologists have tried to study the reason why it hit the cultural peak, I guess it did back then. And the theory I've read that makes far and away the most sense is that this was the first time that you had several factors all converging at once in American culture. The big one was you had almost the entire adult male population who had returned from World War II all dealing with PTSD
Correct. Right.
over shit they saw.
Yeah.
Right.
You had the second thing is it coincided with the cultural paradigm shift of people moving from rural communities into urban communities,
Okay,
where
right.
people have a lot more time to think and dwell on shit, I
Right.
guess, and you're sort of dealing with sensory overload.
Yeah.
And the other one is that it coincided with Freud and there being a high level of interest in mental health
I see. Right. Right.
up to that point. But the thing about mental health at that point in time was that it was still seen by the public as, this refuge for the insane. Like, people knew about lobotomies.
Oh, right. Right.
Yeah,
And it was
still
some-
was not a nice.
Yeah, it was something
Kind of taboo.
It was something you didn't want to mess with.
No.
Right.
And the
Because
thing,
they were still doing just ungodly. I want to say experiments.
Yeah, they were.
Like,
Yeah.
like lobotomizing and
Electroshock,
Yes,
you know.
it was a cruel practice.
Yeah. Absolutely.
and psychotherapy was seen by the bulk of the public anyway, people who didn't live in New York or LA that lived in flyover country.
Right.
They saw psychotherapy as being very inaccessible, very expensive, and the word they would usually use is very Jewish.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
because it was seen as like this New York Jewish thing.
I
Like,
got you. Right.
So basically, like, translates into expensive and inaccessible.
Right.
Right.
Something out of your grasp of your everyday country boy.
Yeah,
so to say. Right,
and that was
right.
what Dianetics was billed as. It was billed as like a way you could clear your traumas with a friend if you wanted for the price of a paperback book.
There you go. It made it accessible.
It was
It
literally
made it
lightning in a
accessible.
bottle for the moment.
Right.
It captured the cultural imagination for a time.
Right.
So the way I can explain Dianetics laid out is you have to understand like the definitions they use for things, and they map out the brain, or Hubbard maps out the brain a little bit differently. And there's several definitions we have to sort of go over. A big one is a thetan. Do
Right.
you know what a thetan is?
Basically, what I saw on South Park.
A thetan is a soul.
Okay.
It's a fancy word for a soul. It was just that when he would write out equations, I guess, or claim he had written out equations,
quote unquote equations.
He would use the Greek symbol for theta.
Okay, I got you.
To mean soul.
I see.
So you have that. An engram is a fancy word for a memory.
Okay.
Under his idea of how the brain works, from the time you're born, or really even before, from the time you're in the womb, your mind works like a video camera.
Okay.
It captures every second of every memory.
Right.
He sort of appropriates Freud's left brain, right brain idea into what he calls the analytical mind and the reactive mind.
Okay.
So the analytical mind is the visible part. It may as well be the whole brain, but it's what you see, it's what you think with, it's what you do everything with throughout the day.
Right.
The reactive mind is sort of this hypothetical part of the brain that's where all of your traumas are stored.
Could be like the subconscious.
Yeah,
kind of in that neighborhood, or
it's in that neighborhood.
Okay.
That's sort of close to it in a way people can understand, but not entirely accurate.
I got you.
But yeah,
right.
So it's where all of your traumas, all of your bad memories, everything become stored.
Right.
And what it does is the reactive mind puts stress on the analytical mind.
Okay.
So what the process of auditing is it's you and somebody else who is filling the role of a psychotherapist, basically, will ask you to go over a traumatic event over and over and over again.
Right.
And the idea is that you're discharging the power from that engram.
Basically, you're taking it from the reactive part of your brain and putting it into the analytical part.
Yes.
You're taking expel it.
You're taking it out of that bank and putting it into
another one, basically, to dissipate it.
And the way you do that is by decharging the negative energy around it. And this is really like a lot of gobbledygook, I guess.
Yeah.
But it sort of you can almost condense it down to talking about shit that's bothering you with a friend will make you feel better.
Right. Yeah, right.
I mean, it's really just overcomplicating it,
right,
to sound more profound than it is.
Yeah, exactly. But it's something we all know is just how it is.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's the idea behind auditing, though. And what Hubbard postulates in Dianetics is that if a person removes all of their traumatic memories from the reactive mind and moves them into the analytical mind, then they will attain a hypothetical state called clear, with a capital C.
Okay.
And clear means you have no more, like I said, no more traumatic memories.
Right.
And that by doing that, he theorized that you would gain essentially superpowers.
Okay.
That you could levitate, walk through walls.
Oh, wow.
And the big one is that you would have whole track recall from the time you were in the womb. You could remember every moment.
Wow.
Like if you were a clear, the way he postulates in the text of Dianetics is like I could ask you, all right, August 10th, 1993, Thursday, what did you have for breakfast?
And I could tell you
could
like
tell
that.
me, boom, like that.
Just know it, instant recall.
That's what a clear is.
So let me ask you, Reverend, would you consider the clear to be the highest level? Is there? I'm assuming there's
in Dianetics, a clear is the highest level.
The top, okay.
But see, the thing that happened, and the way we got from Dianetics to Scientology is because around, again, we have to go back to his biography and say that there's an actual reason for things happening, and there's his version of why things happen.
Right.
In his version of the way things happen, he had continued his research for so long that he realized that the womb wasn't the beginning, that we led past lives.
Right.
And that he continued his research, and that Scientology was the study of the soul.
Okay.
Rather than just the mind.
Right. Okay.
Now, the actual reason is because around 1952-53, you had tons and tons of people who were attesting to clear and had none of the superpowers that he had advertised.
Right.
So he had to not look ridiculous, he had to say, well, wait a second. There's
rewrite
more
this.
going on.
Yeah.
Not quite all of it.
Yeah. Let's add another chapter here. Add
Yeah.
another step to it.
And that's what Scientology is. It's the study of the soul.
Okay.
So,
in my understanding, at this time at 52, that he had gone bankrupt.
he went bankrupt several times after Dianetics happened. And it wasn't through anything he did directly. It was largely through mismanaged money. Like, he was somebody who was really trusting with people. I've always heard in interviews that I believe this was with Arthur C. Clarke, who was describing Hubbard, and he said that the thing he'll always remember about him was he was like that guy you knew who would come into a room and just charm everybody present and say, I can tell you everything that's wrong with the world. I can tell you the secrets of everything. And then when he would get up, he'd be like, "Man, can I borrow 50 bucks from you?"
There it is.
Then he was he was that guy.
We've all known that guy.
We all, yeah,
absolutely.
Now, did he also lose the rights to Dianetics?
Yeah, he did.
Oh, I didn't know
He
that.
did
I've
at
never
one
heard
point.
that.
I don't even remember exactly who it was that gained control of it. I think it was somebody that sued him.
Okay. Yeah, that's new to me. I thought that he would always just, be the guy for that.
Yeah.
So I guess he did get him back, or the estate. I would assume.
Yeah, at one point
they kind of came back.
At one point or another, there was a lot of things like that happened in the early 1950s.
Okay. Gotcha.
If you want to see a really good movie that's a timeline of that happening, the last movie Philip Seymour Hoffman ever did is a movie called The Master.
Okay.
It's the story of he plays L. Ron Hubbard.
Oh no shit! I didn't know that.
And this was his final role. It was Philip Seymour Hoffman, Joaquin Phoenix, Amy Adams. It was directed by the guy that did Boogie Nights.
Oh no! What's the name again?
The Master.
Master. I've never even heard of that.
Oh, it's another one of those that's like a double title. Like, have you ever looked at that? How all movie titles basically have double meanings to them?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Well, it's like the Master is in like the top guy, but also the mast of a ship. Yeah,
I got you. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to check that out. I didn't even know that existed.
Yeah.
That's going on the list.
Well, it was one that wasn't advertised very widely.
Right. Do you think there might? Well, let me ask you, man. All right.
Because it would have been career suicide in Hollywood.
That's
to do it,
basically
yeah.
what I was going to ask. Yeah, that was my question.
And there's an interesting conspiracy theory that was popular a couple years ago that says it was the reason Philip Seymour Hoffman was killed.
That was another thing I was going to ask. Do you think there was any connection there?
I honestly don't know.
Right. It's just, but it does make you scratch your head.
Yeah, it's an interesting one.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the way I can start with Scientology is that it's another one like Dianetics, where it's a word that he pulled out of his ass
made up
from reading a dictionary and looking at Latin words, and it comes from the word "scieno," which means the study of.
Right.
No, I take that back. It comes from scieno, which means knowingness or knowledge.
Right.
And then ology, which means the study of.
Right.
So with Scientology, we have the study of knowingness or the study of knowledge.
Yeah.
Which it really doesn't mean
anything. It's just
the knowing of knowing.
Yeah.
Knowing how to know.
Yeah. And goddamn, it worked. That's the real bitch about it, man. It fucking worked. Well, I tell you what, guys, man, we're getting close.
I am a doist.
Yeah. The doing of doing things.
The doing of doing
things. Yeah. I was going to say, guys, we're about to get to the halfway point. It might be a good place to take a break, then we can come back and we can start hitting Scientology, like, I guess from the beginning, or from the beginning of the actual church.
Yeah.
Does that sound good to you guys?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, don't go anywhere. We're going to have a word from our sponsors, and we'll be right back. What's up, Puds? This is Jason from the Pudcast with Jason and Mike, and I'm here to invite you to check out the premier video game store in the greater Charlotte area, GameSwap, located at 112 Northeast Court Square in beautiful downtown Lincoln in the great state of North Carolina. Whether you're looking to buy, sell, or trade classic consoles and games like Nintendo, Atari, and Sega, or modern systems like Xbox One and PS4, GameSwap has you covered. And GameSwap is much more than just a video game store. T-shirts, comics, records, toys, collectibles, and much, much more all here. And don't forget to like them on Facebook. And hey, while you're at it, check out the podcast with Jason and Mike with a brand new episode dropping every Sunday. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, and podcast.com. Music provided by Silence Is My Canvas. All right, everyone. Slender Pud number 2. We're back for the second half of the good news with the Reverend Doctor. So I turn it back over to your co-host, Agent C.
Agent C, man. We're going to go, and we're leaving Dianetics, and we're going into a totally different world now.
Yeah.
A completely, totally different place.
We're going to learn how to know how to know.
Yes, and I was going to ask Agent C, was that a pun, talking about going to other worlds?
I hope so.
Yeah.
Because, brother, that was perfect.
I mean, you talk about a complete and total 180 from what was invented or designed to what was manufactured now. It's completely and totally different. It's out of this world.
Literally,
Right?
literally out of this world. Literally.
So how does this begin?
The beginning of Scientology, as we were just talking about, is really the end of Dianetics.
Right.
Because one is the natural evolution of the other. You can't have one without the other. Like, even in current Scientology, Dianetics is called Book One.
Okay.
Calling it the Bible of Scientology really isn't entirely accurate, but it's very much like the foundational document.
Okay.
Because the way it would work is if you decided to get involved with Scientology like this afternoon or something, if you went into an auditing center, they would say, okay, we're going to have you fill out a questionnaire. We're going to have you start auditing through all of your traumas, and you would pay astronomical sums of money
Right.
for hours of auditing. I don't know how much it is now. I think it's a couple $100 for an hour session.
Jesus, right. Okay.
Like, I mean, really, oh God, I don't even know where to go with that. But how?
It's a hell of a business. I mean,
No shit.
yeah. I mean, they're definitely successful
Yeah.
financially speaking.
And theoretically, you would go for ever doing this. I mean, some people might spend years on it until you reach clear, and then you would say, okay, what's next? And they would say, we're going to start working on the operating thetan levels,
Okay.
which is where you learn about the soul.
Right.
Now, and calling Scientology a religion requires some clarification too, because it is. People like to say it's not a religion; it's a scam.
Right.
That's not really true. It is a religion, just not a religion in the way most Americans think of it. It's a religion almost in the Eastern sense, where imagine somebody who's like a novice or a neophyte meets with a shaman or a guru, and they do this on an individual way where somebody like works themselves up through levels of mastery.
Right.
It's not like something where everybody goes into church on a Sunday and like sings songs.
Right,
and
right,
shit.
right.
Like, I mean, it's a religion in the Eastern sense of the word.
Right.
We were just talking earlier, and it's really the purest American religion
Absolutely.
Yeah.
that
It's,
there is.
it's the first one that totally broke with the old world of Abrahamism,
Right.
and became an entirely and Eastern thought, really too,
Exactly.
and became an entirely uniquely American religion. And like I said, it's the first one where celebrity became profit rather
Right.
than vice versa.
Right.
And I said something to the effect, and it's also, to my knowledge, the first religion, quote unquote religion, that was brought to the masses by television.
Right.
Another American institution. Another American pillar, which I find is kind of ironic. And also, the religion, quote unquote religion, is very self-absorbed.
I mean, the
It's
first
what's
place
inside.
I mean, if we do play with that idea of Dianetics being the Bible of Scientology, the Bible was first sold in fucking supermarkets.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly,
mean,
just like Dianetics.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, man. I mean, some of the, not necessarily comparisons, but just some of the ways that these religions are, just one being, very Americanized is what I'm trying to get to.
Right.
Marketing.
It's marketing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to get to, man. Just how it was marketed, how it was brought to the masses was very Americanized. Very,
So part of what happened was when Dianetics was first released to the public, the first people that Hubbard marketed it towards was the APA and the AMA, and he advertised, or he billed this as being the final conclusion of the theories Freud had talked about, that where Freud began talking about the conscious and the subconscious, Hubbard said this is the actualization of all that, and this is the way a person can cure themselves.
Right.
Now, when they got a hold of it, they read through it and said, this is like quack theory. Like, I mean, this is, and you don't even really seem to understand Freud fully. Like, this is almost like a lunatic revision of Freud's ideas.
Right.
So that caused Hubbard to have a huge axe to grind against both the medical community and the psychiatry community, which he held for the rest of his life, and only grew and grew and grew. And if you look at how Scientology views psychologists and the field of mental health, it's not very kindly.
Right.
I mean, they're almost like mortal enemies in a lot of ways. But it all stems from that.
From that, exactly.
Yeah, basically, it all goes back to that. So Hubbard ran afoul of a number of different government bodies, like both the APA and the AMA, like I said, but also with the IRS for tax fraud, with the FBI and CIA for a number of like really shady shit that was happening. Mainly it goes back to dealing with critics, like when people would leave his inner circle, even back at the very beginning, and he was a really paranoid person who thought that they were going to ruin him.
Right.
So he would say, okay, they got to be dealt with. And, you know, it was kind of like up in the air as to how far that went.
Right.
But these people would come to the authorities and say, this guy's a megalomaniac, and they began compiling a dossier on him.
Okay, right.
So I believe it was in the late 1950s that he left America totally and relocated to England. And he started billing himself as this old, like a country doctor, I guess, who was, you know, charming all the local populace. And it didn't take long before he began running afoul of MI5 and British authorities there. Right. So he hit the idea, we're going to go to international water.
Right.
And that's where you begin seeing like a big shift in the church, I guess, at that point.
Right.
And there's three real groups that emerged from this, because the most hardcore of his followers went with him and joined him.
Right.
And they became the clergy of Scientology. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So
absolutely.
The three groups that formed at this time was that you need to familiarize yourself with the terms is well, the big boat that he bought was a cargo ship that had been used back in World War II that was called the Royal Scotsman, and he renamed it to the Apollo.
Okay.
So the three groups that formed from the Apollo is, the first one was the Guardian's Office, which was led by his wife, Mary Sue Hubbard. Now, Mary Sue Hubbard was his third wife, and she was the one he stayed married to from the beginning of the church.
Okay.
His other wives were ones that he was married to when he was a pulp fiction writer,
Gotcha.
and so on, that he really didn't have contact with anymore.
Right.
And he had 3 children from his past 2 marriages, but this was his first one that was his real, like, where his public persona began, I guess.
Gotcha.
So she wasn't somebody who was a very front and center character. But she almost ran the church from behind the scenes.
Right.
And what the Guardian's Office was it'd be helpful to think of it as like the intelligence wing of the church, as far as as far as gathering information, dealing with critics, dealing with government bodies that they thought were going to harass them or give them a hard time.
Right.
And it came in really useful and began really crystallizing at this time, because the Apollo began having a lot of problems with when they would try to dock in foreign countries. They would get denied access. So this became about gathering intel about the heads of different countries, finding out which ones had orders against the Apollo docking there. And
got you.
You know, at first it was just going to be like, you know, talk to them, deal with them, things like that. Right. But it grew and grew and grew into what it became. And Hubbard developed this idea that there was a grand, like, globalist body that was out to get him.
Kind of a conspiracy.
Yeah.
Right.
So the Guardian's Office, the Commodore's Messenger Org was the second of the groups that followed. These were, Hubbard liked to surround himself with teenagers, like primarily young girls.
Right.
But
okay.
but there were boys who were also a part of it. There's no indication that this was like a real like sexual thing or anything like that. This was just these kids all gravitated around Hubbard, and they enjoyed the power kick they got from being his messengers.
Right. And I'm sure he enjoyed having those people following him like that as well.
Yeah.
Kind of a mutual...
Because these kids became more powerful than their parents.
Right.
And they were acting on Hubbard's direct authority. They really enjoyed it.
Right.
And so this was another camp that really formed at this moment. And the third is the Sea Org, or the Sea Organization, which is, like I said, the clergy of Scientology. It's the most hardcore of the followers.
Right.
So around the time of Operation Snow White, which was... Do you know the story behind that?
No, I'm not familiar.
Okay. I'm trying to think where to go back and start with this. There were a number of operations that happened by order of the Guardian's office back in the 1970s that laid the foundational groundwork for a lot of the shit that happened. One of them was called Operation Freakout, and another one called Operation Dynamite, which was... There was a woman named Paulette Cooper who was a journalist in New York who had written a book called The Scandal of Scientology. And if you go back and read it now, it's really, really mild by today's standards. Like in a lot of places, it almost seems like she bends over backwards to say nice things about Hubbard.
Oh, yeah, right.
Because she didn't want to seem too bad, but he fucking hit the roof over it. So he developed this plan of how to deal with her. And there's a lot of skepticism over exactly what it entailed, but the general consensus, it was designed to have her either put in prison or committed to a mental institution to discredit her. So Operation Freakout was the plan of having someone do a stakeout, find out what her favorite neighborhood bar was in New York, and send a Scientology agent to go and start a relationship with her, move in with her, and be her, pretend live-in boyfriend. But what he was going to be daily doing was gathering intel.
Jesus Christ,
about everything
man.
she did. And yeah, that happened for several years, actually.
A fucking spy.
Yeah, the guy she thought was like her live-in boyfriend was a Scientology agent.
Jesus.
Wow.
So there was that, and then the other one, what that bled into was Operation Dynamite, where his goal that was handed down from somebody from the Guardian's office anyway was to get her fingerprints on a piece of paper that they would then use to write a letter, which would be a bomb threat to an Arab embassy.
Holy shit.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, so they were setting up to frame this woman for a bomb threat.
Yeah.
Gee.
So
Well, damn. Okay.
that's just sort of like one of the ones that happened at the time. I mean, if you go ever look on Wikipedia at scandals that happen, different operations done by the Guardian's office, it's pretty mind-blowing, like how big the list is.
Damn,
Wow.
man.
Yeah, but what Operation Snow White was it was probably the biggest one, and it was when a number of church members infiltrated different government agencies for the purpose of gathering intel on, who had negative internal memos about Scientology, negative memos about L. Ron Hubbard, and basically finding out who these people were and how to deal with them.
So what you're telling me, Reverend, is that Scientology basically infiltrated the government.
Not only that, but it's to this day the single largest infiltration of the U.S. government in history.
Jesus Christ. I mean, you're talking about foreign nations, hostile nations.
Yeah.
Everything it didn't even, like the stuff with Russia, everything, it doesn't even scratch the surface of what Scientology. I had no idea.
No.
Obviously, I knew it was a huge organization. I knew, that
they had people infiltrate the highest levels of the IRS, the AMA, the APA, FBI, number of foreign embassies. I mean, I think all in all there was around 3 or 4 dozen different government agencies that they infiltrated.
Like I said, I knew that they had a lot of tentacles, and I knew they were in a lot of places. I didn't know it was like that. I didn't know it was to that degree. Like I said, I'm not that
well,
familiar.
we'll talk about
Yeah.
that more in a second.
Yeah.
But see, the way the church was under Hubbard and the way the church is now, they're two completely different animals.
Okay.
Like when Hubbard was alive, the church had teeth to it.
Right,
But
right.
now, I mean, it's kind of a joke.
Yeah, I was going to say, man, it's not given the same kind of, I guess.
Like back in the day, like Scientology was just something like you didn't fuck with.
Right,
Right.
right, untouchable.
Yeah.
Now it's a joke. It's a punchline.
Yeah. Yeah, basically.
But like I said, I didn't know it was to that degree to where they literally infiltrated the United States government. That's scary.
Yeah, so Operation Snow White was basically that. It was the government infiltration, and it ended up getting busted one way or another. If I remember this right, it all stemmed from a raid that was conducted on a couple different churches. I believe one in Seattle and one in Washington, D.C., that stemmed from them advertising the e-meter as a legitimate medical device that could, where auditing could be used to cure cancer and like a number of different illnesses.
Right.
So they began compiling a big file on Scientology because of that, and some from one way or another, it rolled from that into discovering or breaking up Operation Snow White.
Okay. Right.
And now at this time, because of the blowback from it, Hubbard disappeared and went off the map. And Mary Sue was the one who took the fall for it. The name of the court case was the United States of America versus Mary Sue Hubbard plus defendants, or et al, I guess.
Okay.
And there was a couple dozen Guardian's Office people that all did time in prison over it. So at this time, you began seeing the power struggle emerging between the Guardian's Office, the Sea Org, and the Commodore's Messenger Org.
But no, Reverend now, but Hubbard is still alive though, correct?
Hubbard is alive, but he's in hiding.
He's okay. I got you.
And
Okay.
what this was culminating with was, at this time, he was also degenerating into old age and mental illness.
Right.
And the way they've always described it is he was beginning to look like Howard Hughes was during his final years, where he was just like a recluse and a shut-in.
Yeah.
And, you know, basically what you imagine.
Right, exactly. Just getting old.
Poor health,
And he was
poor hygiene.
Yeah,
Right,
And he was
right.
somebody they had to keep hidden from the public because of everything that he had built his work is working towards.
Exactly, because somebody saw him in that state, it may take away from Scientology as a whole.
Bingo.
Right.
Yeah. So the Guardian's Office, like I said, was essentially led by Mary Sue Hubbard, and the Commodore's Messenger Org. There were a number of these people who had been teenagers on the Apollo that were now young adults who were, for all practical purposes, they were running the Sea Org.
Gotcha.
And they were running the church. In the aftermath of, or I guess really during the time where Hubbard is completely off the map, and right at the time he dies, the Mary Sue Hubbard has essentially been like pushed to the side by the Commodore's Messenger Org, and the Guardian's Office has been purged.
Okay.
So this leaves these guys as being who's going to take charge of the church, and there was about 10 who were really significant figures at this time. But the three who were the most important was, there was a man and woman named Pat and Annie Broker who had been in the Sea Org, and they were the ones who Hubbard lived with and cared for him during his final years. They owned a ranch that he lived at. And the third was a guy named David Miscavige, who had been essentially Hubbard's liaison to the church, who would ride back and forth from the ranch to deliver messages to everybody.
Right.
So these were the three people who was I guess really who the power struggle was between, with the brokers on one side and David Miscavige on the other.
Right.
And the way the brokers, there's a YouTube video you can watch where it's Hubbard's death announcement, where they gather everybody and they tell him that Hubbard has dropped his body and that he's ascended to a higher level of existence to study and further his research. Right. So during this speech, his will is read, where it said that in his will, Pat and Annie Broker have been promoted to Loyal Officer 1 and Loyal Officer 2. So everybody who was present said, okay, this means that they're going to be the ones running the church now. Even though like nobody really knew who they were.
Yeah, right.
They had just been like big figures behind the scenes. So they had, I guess you would say their big their big hidden hand that they had was they claimed to have Hubbard's final writings.
Okay.
They claimed that they were in possession of the operating thetan levels that went all the way up to 15.
Right.
And that I guess they were holding that over everybody's head. Right. Well, there came a point in time where it became really cutthroat between them and David Miscavige, and he had essentially been running the church for all practical purposes ever since Mary Sue Hubbard went to prison, and Hubbard and the brokers were behind the scenes. He was essentially the de facto leader.
Gotcha.
Like I said, just because he was the most senior Scientologist.
Right.
I guess. So he had made a call one day when Pat Broker was in D.C. having a meeting with some government agency, and he goes, we've got a report that the FBI is doing a raid on the ranch.
Right.
You need to tell us where the writings are at right now, otherwise we're going to lose them.
Right.
So it was essentially like his last hand he had, and he goes, okay, they're in this file cabinet.
Right.
And they got him, and then from that point in time, the brokers were essentially like purged from the church.
I got you.
So
let me ask you, Reverend, are those papers, is that where we get the story of Xenu?
no, that's actually in operating thetan level 3.
Oh, okay.
But level 3 is what they call the Wall of Fire teaching, where there's this whole mythology around it that they say that if a person reads it before they're ready, before they've worked their way up to it, that they're going to develop fatal pneumonia, and essentially their soul just goes away, but their body keeps going.
Okay.
Then they become like a
non-playable
zombie.
or a non-playable character.
Now another way of saying that might be if you read it before you've paid large sums of money.
There you go. Talk about leveling up.
Yeah.
In-game purchases here. You know?
Then you're going to say, what am I doing?
But Reverend, I mean, I don't want to get too far off track, but I do want to circle around to the Xenu story at some point, because that's what really...
We'll get there.
Absolutely, because that's what brought me into even hearing about Scientology, really hearing about it, because I'd always heard about it, in passing. I had no idea what it was. I wasn't, into church. I wasn't really into science at the time, so why bother? But then, obviously the Xenu thing came up on South Park, and that was when I got interested. I was like, okay.
The way I guess I'll wrap up this topic is to say that around the time, which was 1987 or 1988, when Miscavige took full control of the church, we essentially come to a status quo till the present. I mean, there's been a lot of really minor things that have happened since then. Like in the early 90s, they acquired tax-exempt status.
Oh, yes.
Right. There's been a couple of scandals related to celebrities leaving the church.
Tom Cruise,
that
stuff.
Type of thing.
Yeah.
Probably the most relevant has been Leah Remini.
Right.
And there's been a lot of former high-level executives that have left and claimed David Miscavige beat them up and things like that.
Beat the thetan out of them.
That have come out and claimed that, and that makes for real interesting tabloidy type shit, I guess.
Right.
But and probably the two most relevant was there was a guy named David Mayo back in the mid 1980s who was Hubbard's auditor, who started the free zone movement, where basically it's similar to how it is now, where people can look up the OT levels on WikiLeaks, and you can read it for yourself and do Scientology without paying the church.
Right.
And the other one was a guy named Marty Rathbun, who was the former number 2 guy under David Miscavige, who handled external affairs for probably about 20 years or so. Those have been probably the two most relevant ones, I guess. But really, after Hubbard's death, I mean, it's kind of status quo. Beyond that, it's it's not really dynamic. It's a lot of tabloidy shit.
Right. Well, it's we were saying earlier, the church kind of lost its teeth, I guess you could say, around it. Right.
I think, it always amazed me with you mentioned South Park with Isaac Hayes.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's right.
And everything that was going on, because Isaac Hayes was a member.
Yes.
And South Park was, not kind to Scientology.
No, oh no. In fact, I'm trying to remember.
They weren't wrong.
No. And I'm trying to remember the timeline, man, because didn't something happen with Isaac Hayes first, and then they did the Xenu episode, or did they do the Xenu episode and then Isaac Hayes left? I can't.
He left after.
Yes.
Okay.
He said, "Please don't do this. Please don't involve me." And
Or the church.
Anything that's detrimental to the religion.
Well,
is
and Trey
the church.
Parker and Matt Stone, from what I remember, replied, and they said, you didn't have a problem doing this when it was Christianity
Or Islam.
any other the religion we've done, but now when it's yours, you're
Now-
backing out.
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of hypocritical.
Yeah.
And not only that, because we know how South Park has always
Right.
been, man, very non-politically correct. I mean, they went after everybody. They
Right.
go after Christians. They go after Muslims. They went after Scientology.
Everybody.
Which
And the
is why
fact
I've
that
always
he
liked
felt
the
so
show.
strongly about this that he left the show
Yeah.
that basically reinvented.
It brought him back into the spotlight.
Absolutely.
Because he kind of had, gotten a little stale. Obviously he was an artist from the 70s and everything, and he kind of died out. And then South
Made him
Park
a
Well,
brought him back.
pop character.
Yeah.
you
See,
know?
it makes sense when you understand one of the things about Scientology is that there's several different experiences a person can have in it. There's three, I guess. There's a public Scientologist, there's clergy or Sea Org, and there's celebrity.
Right.
Now, the experience that a public person has in Scientology might be like if you or I bought a copy of Dianetics, went down, like, took a class or two or something, then just lost interest and left.
Right.
Okay, it's, the horror stories you hear, like, aren't from public Scientologists.
Right.
I mean, except for ones who, like, were just stupid and spend astronomical
Yeah.
sums of money on them or something.
Exactly.
But, so, public Scientologists are going to have one experience. Clergy are going to have a very different experience,
Right.
where they're the ones who, talk about, like, having to escape and jump fences and shit like
yeah,
that.
right.
Yeah, like, sorry.
I just had this
Sorry.
image of people jumping the Scientology
I mean,
fence,
it does. I
But
mean,
seriously, though,
yeah.
I mean, it's like they're escaping prison for real, man.
Yeah.
Shawshank that shit, man. Dig up under.
see, that's the thing.
The Thetan redemption.
yeah,
Well, see,
yeah.
that's the thing that always amazes me is going back to Hayes and looking at Tom Cruise
Yeah.
and oh my God,
Leah?
no, not Leah, John Travolta.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
right. That's right. He was.
How just if you even make mention of this, how they clam up and how incensed they become about this.
Yeah.
I'll tell you why, and it's because of that third category. I was going to say, I said you have public, you have clergy, but the experience celebrities have with Scientology is it's always filled a dual role of not just a religion, it's a protection racket for actors.
Right.
So go into that, Reverend. Like,
Okay, it's... Oh, boy. I don't even know how to start with it. It's...
is it due to like some of the legal, like, because I know Scientologists.
It's a power behind the scenes.
Right.
It's a hidden hand. It's like it's a lobbying for people who are who could get lost within the studio system.
Right, 'cause-
It's a union almost.
And I think when you said lobby, that sounds pretty much right on point.
It
man. They
almost
lobby
feels
for
it
the
almost
lobbyist.
it almost feels like an old school mob role.
Right.
Where and there was a reason why Hollywood writers for years and years would not talk about Scientology or write about it. It's because if you did, they would fuck you up.
They would come after
like
you.
if you
Yeah.
wrote articles saying, "Hey, John Travolta's queer,"
Yeah,
or
yeah.
Tom Cruise uses this church to shop for girlfriends or some shit like that, they would fuck you up.
They would
Right.
they would rain hellfire down upon you, because I think you actually put up a meme, Reverend, if I'm not mistaken, and it was just listing different religions and different things, and it may not have been you. I can't remember right off. I saw it briefly, but the one about Scientology said we have lawyers, or we'll sue you, or it was something to that nature. Basically,
well, it came from the whole thing over the Sri Lanka bombings.
that was it.
Where the way Barack Obama replied to it on Twitter was he said, thoughts and prayers with the Easter worshipers.
Yeah,
and all
saw
these
that.
people on the alt-right blogosphere were going, why didn't you just say Christians?
Right.
Use some kind of like a secret Muslim
Yeah,
bigot or something.
yeah.
And which is, man, I won't even go into that. I don't guess.
That'll be for another show.
Yeah.
Okay, the short story to that is because in Sri Lanka on Easter, it's also a pagan holiday.
Right,
So
right.
all different groups are out there on Easter. Right. But anyway, there's this list that says the new politically correct names for different religions, and for Christians it says Easter worshippers. For Buddhists it says Nirvana fan.
That's right.
For Wiccan it says Hot Topic shopper.
Yes.
For atheists it says teenager, and so on and so on.
Yeah.
And then the last one it says Scientologist, and then it just says comment redacted by our lawyers.
That was it. So bottom line, man, Scientology has always been lawyered up, as they say.
Fuck yeah,
I mean, I'm talking hardcore lawyered up.
Yeah. Do you know the story of Charles Manson's experience with Scientology?
No.
Very little.
I sent you a YouTube video about it. Watch that when you get a minute. So, the story goes that when Manson was in prison the first time, all the way up to 1967 when he got released, that there were two books that he read in lockup that had a real profound effect on him. The first one was How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, and the other was Dianetics.
Wow.
And
it's a hell of a combination.
yeah, and the story goes that he and his cellmate, messed around with Dianetics. They cleared each other and everything. And the first thing he did when he was released in 1967 is he walks into a Scientology building, and he goes, so I've reached clear, what comes next, I'm interested. And I don't know how true this is, or if this is just something that's become popular lore, but they begin talking to him and walking him through the process, and he left after like 20 minutes, and he said, "This shit's too weird for me."
Manson.
Wow.
The Helter Skelter man himself said this shit was too weird.
Yeah.
So, you take that as you want.
Yeah.
But see, that's interesting because it formulated like a lot of Dianetics anyway, rather than Scientology, formulated a lot of what came with the Manson family, though, because there's stories where if you listen to Squeaky Fromme or a lot of these women who describe their first night with Manson when they first were intimate and everything, they say that it followed a long conversation where he would ask them about their childhood, their past.
Oh, really?
And yeah, like what he was doing was he was auditing,
right?
And they
Yeah,
said
yeah.
they said that by the time they had sex, it was like the most ultimate release, that they never felt more connected to a person.
Now, let me ask you, Reverend, were these people on LSD at the time? Because I know Charles Manson used LSD a lot for, I guess his conditioning.
Right.
So,
Well, a lot of this stuff that, like I said, where his one-on-one with a person, where they would say it was like he was staring into my soul,
You're
it
right.
came from things he had learned from Dianetics.
Right.
Yeah.
So basically, he's taking all these different aspects, like Dianetics,
And Carnegie and everything.
yeah, and then putting the psychedelics on top of that, man. Yeah, I mean, you could definitely, and if you're already a charisma, have charisma like he did, obviously.
Well, there's actually a story that goes that one of Manson's top lieutenants was a guy named Bruce Davis, and he actually sent him over to England, to St. Hill Manor, to try to enroll in some courses, but his real reason was Manson wanted to keep tabs on Hubbard and find out what he was up to.
Oh, no shit, man.
Yeah.
So there was that connection there. That's, just in this podcast alone, Reverend, I've learned that that Hubbard had a connection to both Manson and to Crowley. That both of those blow my mind, man.
Right.
That's, yeah.
Well, that's a lot of, like, you want to come back around to the Xenu story.
Yes.
And tell me your version of the events for what you know of it.
Once again, just going back, my first exposure to this story was the South Park little cartoon that they did. They had like a little, animated. Well, obviously South Park is animated, but they had like a little skit within that. Basically, just that Xenu was a evil overlord on another planet, centuries and centuries ago. A long time ago, and
Couple
far
trillion.
away. Yeah. And basically, he would take prisoners, and like I said, man, I'm probably getting this screwed up somewhere down the line, but he would take prisoners, and he flew them to Earth in jets, apparently that look like jets that we see today, dropped them into a volcano. The volcano erupted, and then the souls of these prisoners were released, and that became like our negative emotions, like depression, anxiety, all these different negative emotions, and then these thetans or whatever.
Would you like me to explain the story in a way that makes sense?
Absolutely.
See,
Yes.
at the bottom
Yes.
at the bottom of the screen on this, while they're showing this animated, at the bottom of the screen, it states they actually believe this.
Yeah, it said this is what Scientology actually believe. Yeah. So
Yeah.
please, Reverend, yes, let's hear this story from a good viewpoint, not from me, bro.
The long and short that I can explain this to you is that the story's metaphorical.
Okay.
But it is like a cornerstone of Scientology lore,
Right.
I guess.
So, Reverend, let me have, do Scientology, or do the people that practice Scientology, do they believe the Xenu story to be legit?
The easiest way I can explain it to you is there aren't clear instructions given, but a lot of them do take it literally.
Okay.
When a person attains operating thetan level 3, they're taken into a room where somebody comes in with a briefcase that's handcuffed to them.
Right.
And the briefcase just contains the sheet of paper of operating thetan level 3. And they just say, read it, take whatever from it.
Right.
Like, it's whatever it means to you. Now, there's a lot of people that walk away believing this is this literal crazy story that, a lot of celebrities who left, said, I read this and was like, what the fuck?
Right.
But on the other hand, there's a lot of people that knew Hubbard personally and knew his personality that read it. And this is even like people who have left, there was like an old woman who said she read it and she started crying. She goes, it was like he was like right here in the room with me, because I remember what his personality was like.
Right.
And she goes, what he was doing is he was using his old career as a sci-fi writer to tell a parable.
Okay.
And the Xenu story is sort of a combination of a lot of different things. It's a combination of Gnosticism. It's a little bit of Freud. It's a little bit of Crowley. It's a little bit of Darwin. It's all kinds of different shit, like all sort of wrapped into one.
Right.
And now I'm going off this by people who say that the story's metaphorical,
Right.
because I remember when I first read it, I said, this isn't literal.
Right.
Like, if you're somebody who can discern writing in any way at all, you know that it's not a literal story.
Right.
Like, now I know that there's probably a lot of people who are, dumb enough to maybe think that, I guess.
Right.
But
Well, I'll put this out there as devil's advocate. How far is it off from any other Christian religion?
Or any religion for that matter.
Yeah.
it's not that far off. You just have to understand what he's saying and
Yeah.
what it means.
Exactly.
Like-
but there are people that will take,
Oh, at face value, man.
At face
Oh,
value,
absolutely.
Yeah.
everything.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought that it really
On
was
both
what people
sides.
thought. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Obviously, I knew Xenu wasn't real, but I thought that these people...
If somebody's coming in
Believe
and they
it.
hear the story, the Bible and they're
Oh,
like,
a lot of fantastic
Well, I'll
stories.
sort of I'll sort of break
pretty-
down the symbols
yeah.
in the story and explain what the meaning to them is. Xenu comes from the Latin word xeno, which means other.
Okay.
Basically,
Okay.
it's a version he's telling of the Gnostic tale of the demiurge. Like, the demiurge is the idea that there was a lesser god, or Satan, that created the world.
Okay.
And that the earth is the domain of hell,
I see.
essentially.
Okay.
So Xenu traps these souls in airplanes,
Right.
which crash into a volcano. Like, you don't have to be like a Freudian guy to know that that's a sexual metaphor.
Okay. Yeah. I see. Yeah,
I'll just throw that out there. Airplanes, volcanoes. And then it says he blows them up with a hydrogen explosion. Okay, water explosion.
Explosion. Yep. Okay.
Like,
now we're getting into my territory.
we could talk like sex
Agencies, all this
metaphors. Yeah. So
Planes of penis.
basically, these souls are crashed onto Earth, to which they're born by sexual means.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
But it says these souls try to escape, but they hit a force field, which is, how does the story go? Okay, it goes, they're trapped in the volcano, and they're shown images that are arranged by psychologists and religious heads that brainwash people. What the story, if we cut behind the jargon, what the story is essentially saying is that, we don't know the true origin of life on Earth, but it's something other, I guess.
Okay.
But
yeah.
souls are put here and incarnated through sexual means, and from the time that they're conceived, the world around them works to brainwash them, and it's largely through psychology and religion.
That makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, when you understand the crystallization of Hubbard's worldview and how he thought, and the way in all of his other speeches how he would tell parables just like this.
Just like Jesus did.
Yeah, because
really.
Hubbard, above all else, was a storyteller who worked in the field of sci-fi.
Right.
This was his version of telling a parable about this.
Yeah, and that makes complete sense.
So all these souls are, brainwashed from conception by these forces that work to undermine and trap us.
Right.
But he believed that there was essentially like a force field that kept people from climbing higher and higher and escaping their condition, that we were essentially like stuck here.
Right.
So, but what he said though was that through these applied philosophical maxims that he was putting out in the school of thought, Dianetics and then Scientology, a person can overcome their condition
and get past
as an animal
and get past his force field.
Right.
pretty much.
And learn and learn their true origins.
Right. See, I've never heard that spin put on the Xenu story. That makes so much sense. I mean, because I really did think that Scientologists believed 100% that Xenu was real.
Well, a lot of them do.
Right, exactly.
Because there aren't clear instructions with the story, but I kind of believe that there didn't need to be.
There you go. Right, and given Hubbard's history, just like you just said, it makes sense, and kind of seeing it as more of a metaphor, parable. Yeah,
it's a creation story parable in the way Hubbard would have told it.
There you go. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah. Man, I've learned a lot on today's podcast. I really have about L. Ron Hubbard. A lot of stuff I had no idea.
And South Park was really where we saw a lot of the shift change between people being afraid and not afraid to write about
That's
Scientology.
Because like I said, to me, that South Park episode brought it to my attention because obviously I didn't know Dianetics and Scientology were connected until the Xenu show. And then, you kind of start looking into it, and that's when I was getting more online, too.
Was it that one, or was it the Tom Cruise episode? Which one could they not show for the longest time?
It was I think that was the same.
They were the same episode.
That was the same episode. The closet. R. Kelly was in the closet. Yeah, it's all the same episode.
Was it the same episode?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure was.
It's because the episode goes that Stan doesn't have any money to go to a movie or some shit like that, so he goes into a Scientology
That's right, yeah.
org, and they hook him up to an e-meter and find that his levels are so high he must be L. Ron Hubbard's reincarnation.
Okay. Yep.
And so Tom Cruise and all these celebrities come to him, and they're going, "Oh, what do you think of my work?" And he tells Tom Cruise, he goes, "I mean, you're okay, but you're not as cool as like John Elway," and that devastates him.
And then R. Kelly shows up and
he hides in the closet. Yeah,
come out of the closet.
Come out.
And then Tom Cruise goes in there. Yeah, man. But that was.
Now I'm in the closet.
Yes. Great episode, man.
But for the longest time, it was not going to be showed because Comedy Central and Viacom were afraid to get sued.
Yeah. I mean, they did threaten him with legal action. If I'm not mistaken, they did have that out there.
So, Mike, here's one we've got to hit on. What do you know about the Process Church of the Final Judgment?
Okay. Oh my God. Are we? Oh my God. There's no way we can get into that today. That is way too.
Let's briefly.
I was going to say,
touch on it right quick if you want to, but
because it was an offshoot of Scientology.
Yeah, and it is deep. It goes very, very deep.
Well, let me ask you guys this: would you like to do a show on that? I was going to say we could hit on it.
Yeah, we're going to definitely have to do one on that.
But yeah, maybe.
I'll tell you what. Let's do. Let's spend the next the final maybe 5 to 10 minutes of the show. Let's briefly go into it.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, man, because we're probably pushing toward the end, and I know, I was going to say, we'll go ahead and go into that.
Go ahead.
All right, Mike.
We'll touch on it right quick because I'm not even prepared for that right now.
Okay, well, the Process Church of the Final Judgment was an offshoot of Scientology that began with a man and woman named the Grimston family, who had been British disciples of Hubbard back in the early days of Dianetics. And they essentially developed their own theology, which was based on it, but it went a whole different direction, even though it was the basis for it. Like the idea of 4 personality archetypes, they developed into the 4 gods, Jehovah, Christ, Lucifer, and Satan.
Okay, I have heard of this actually.
You have.
That rings a bell. Obviously, not enough to really know anything, but that does ring a bell.
Yeah.
Yes.
If you're looking at it as almost a metaphor, if you're looking at Scientology as the Beatles,
Okay.
the process is Black Sabbath.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a great
Wow.
analogy.
Okay. That makes sense. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So they're heavy as shit
Yeah.
compared. Okay. All right.
Yeah, this is going down a dark road.
Right.
A really
okay.
dark one.
Okay. Yes.
Well, because, I mean, you know, of course, Scientology had its dark moments.
sure.
Of course, you know,
Nowhere near as dark as the process.
No,
Right.
not at all. Of course, you know, like with the Beatles, you know, they did their stuff. They had
yeah,
some dark
sure,
stuff
sure,
too,
yeah,
but
yeah.
it was nowhere.
Like Sabbath.
No.
Right.
No.
Got you.
There's a really interesting connection if you want to go down a rabbit hole. I want you to go back and look at, there was an explosion period of serial killers in American culture from the late 1960s,
Right.
probably starting with Manson, although maybe arguably with the Texas Tower shooter,
Right.
with Charles Whitman, going all the way up to Dahmer in the early 90s.
Right.
You know, we all three of us know there was a period where serial killers were huge.
Yeah, they really were, and you don't see it like you used to. You really don't, man. You had like Ted Bundy, obviously Gein, Gacy. Gacy. I'm sorry. Yeah, yeah.
Zodiac.
Lucas, Ramirez,
Zodiac.
all these
Yeah,
guys.
Yeah, exactly.
And when you began examining the backstories of a lot of these people, I believe every single one of them, if you want to play the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon
Right,
game,
right.
was never more than 2 degrees away from the process Church of the Final Judgment.
No shit.
Yeah.
That was. I did not know that.
Yeah.
That's mind blowing.
Yeah. Like literally every single last one of them.
Jesus, man. Well, guys, I tell you what. On that note,
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a whole.
I
whole show.
can't even.
yeah.
Yeah,
I can't even really go into another facet of it because
No.
this is too much.
Yeah,
I would definitely want. I want to revisit this subject
Yeah.
because my interest is peaked. But yeah, we do have to start wrapping it up. I know, Mike, you have to go to work, and sorry to
Yeah.
ruin your day there, brother. You know, but I definitely want to revisit this, and I would like to have a show on this because this is really interesting to
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
And I think what we just ended with is a good place to go ahead and maybe put the brakes on for now. But before we do wrap it up, I'd like to ask both you guys, is there any final thoughts that you'd like to put out there for Scientology for today's show?
wow. I would say, I mean, if you learn anything, you know, look into it, judge for yourself.
Yeah.
Don't take everything at absolute face value and everything
Absolutely.
that you've heard.
Right.
Because honestly, it's really no different from any other religion. It's just more,
Americanized, maybe?
yeah. I would say it's just something that's been done within the past 100 years.
Yeah. It's definitely controversial.
Yeah.
It's definitely, I disagree a little bit with that agency. I don't know if it's
Have you ever heard
just
the
like,
Have you ever heard the definition, the difference between a cult and a religion?
no.
That 99%. This is like an actual statistic that something like 99% of all cults don't survive the death of their leader.
Right.
So if the leader is alive, it's a cult.
If they're
they
dead,
survive, they're a religion.
They're a
Right.
religion. That makes sense. That really does. Well,
Yeah.
well, Ben, brother, Reverend, is there anything you'd like to end us with?
Question.
Yes.
You know, with a lot of the tabloidy shit, like we've talked about, and how there's an all-time peak in public interest in Scientology, like mainly among the housewife demographic.
Right.
Shit. Do you think we're going to see like the death knell of Scientology in our lifetime?
I think so. I do.
I don't.
You don't think so? I think we will. In our lifetime, within the next...
I don't think we're going to
30,
see
40
the death
years.
of Scientology. I think we might see the death of it in its current form.
I was going to say, you may see a resurgence of it, a renaissance or something, but I think what we see today, because like we were talking about earlier, it's almost a punchline now.
Well, the reality to it is, I don't think Scientology is a religion that was built to survive the internet.
Amen.
That secret information like that, when you have open lines of communication, it doesn't survive it well.
No, right. It's bound to fail.
But the most interesting statistic I read several years ago, I guess this was back in 2012, 2013, was the big new group among Scientology had been, hipsters and like young people.
Right.
And they say the reason why it was kind of mind-blowing is that you had people who had read this shit like on WikiLeaks and knew the entire backstory of the religion, like, the Xenu story, like everything they usually try to conceal.
You're right.
And you had these kids in Brooklyn and all these places who were walking in to churches going, hey, I like this stuff. Tell me more about it. And the church people were freezing up. They don't know what to do.
How to handle that.
They're not prepared for it.
Right.
And they just have to go,
Yeah. You've read the Xenu story and you still want to come here?
There are people who are like into it. So that's why I think we may very well see the death of the church in its current form, but I don't think the theology to it's going to go anywhere.
Could you guys actually, and I know we're all wrestling fans in this room, could you maybe even equate that to kayfabe in a way? Of kayfabe dying? Because after kayfabe died, all the purists of professional wrestling we'll never have wrestling again. Right. Jesus Christ, man, that was shit all over because it was bigger than ever. Right. After kayfabe was quote unquote. And if anybody out there is listening, not know what I mean by kayfabe, that's when professional wrestling was perceived to be a legit competition, a legit sport. And then once it was brought out to the masses that it was no longer a legit competition,
right?
The purists like myself even remember thinking, well, pro wrestling's going to die now. And it had the greatest resurgence that it ever had after that. Right. I wonder if Scientology could fall into that same thing now. Now we know a lot of the secrets are out. People know maybe it's a work, quote unquote.
Okay.
Well, and that had been...
It's a fun thing. This looks like a fun...
Right.
Fun thing to
and
be
that,
involved
I think,
in.
Right.
had been the bulk of a lot of its criticism was that, a lot of these people who left the church who, spent like $500,000 on it said, we were required to pay all this money and didn't know what was at the top. We didn't know what we were getting.
Yeah. Right.
We were just sort of getting drug along. But the difference is now you have all these people saying, like, I know it. I know what it's about. I want to get involved with it.
Right.
Which is exactly like pro wrestling now. Back in the day, you had to spend money, you had to pay dues. Rather, you may or may not be brought into the circle after you spent this money, after you got your ass kicked for fucking weeks, months, or years. Now, you can just go on YouTube and see how to bump and start your own fucking wrestling federation.
I've been training for, past year with YouTube videos. I'm ready to
get in there. Yeah. And goddamn they do.
Yeah.
And there you go.
Yeah.
Well, guys, I've enjoyed this. Reverend, as always, thank you for coming down. Thank you for doing this show. This was fun.
This was your theology lesson.
Yes.
There you go.
I did. I will say we do another podcast called The Podcast with Jason and Mike. We don't know who those guys are, but we're sort of affiliated with them. Yeah. I never really learned anything.
They got their own religion.
Yeah, brother, howdy, boy, howdy do they, or lack of.
Yeah.
I don't learn anything on the podcast. Well, sometimes we have Wayne Sisk on.
Yeah.
And I learn some music knowledge, but for the most part, I don't learn shit. Actually, I think I come out dumber usually after we do a podcast.
Potentially, yeah.
Potentially, it's possible.
Yeah.
With the good news
or about penises.
That's a subject that we really need to cut back on.
Okay.
But we'll talk about that tomorrow. And
we will.
We absolutely will. But I feel like every time we do a good news with the Reverend Doctor, I feel like I don't feel it. I know I learn things. I learn something new every time. And Reverend, thank you for that.
Oh yeah,
I appreciate that. All right, well, Agency, anything you want to end us with, brother?
No. Until next time, man.
Next time.
Absolutely.
Yep. All right. Until then, see you guys next time. Stay woke.
This is a test of the emergency broadcast system. The broadcasters of your area, in voluntary cooperation with the FCC and other authorities, have developed this system to keep you informed in the event of an emergency. If this had been an actual emergency, you would have been instructed where to tune in your area for news and official information. This concludes this test of the emergency broadcast system.